cannot hear me, but I'd like to welcome our State Treasurer, Fiona Ma, and
Thank you, Tyrone.
This is number 8. This is the most well attended, the best attended. So either it's getting around that, people show up, they're going to get to, put in their 2 cents, or actually housing is a big issue here in Sacramento, one or both. I do want to also thank from our IT team who is making it available on YouTube and live streaming. We have Greg and Artie. Thank you, Greg and Artie, for your good work. Tomorrow we will be in Fresno in the morning and then San Jose in the afternoon, and that will cap off our 10-city listening tour. So again, I got elected on January 7th. We came out, Joanne and I came out early in January on a 5-city tour just to have a general sense of what is going on. And some cities said, hey, what about us? You missed us. So then we said, okay, we're going to go around again. So we were able to go to cities like Bakersfield and Reading and some of the others just to hear what the state of housing is and what the needs are and what we can do specifically in the Treasurer's Office to better align our goals with Governor Gavin Newsom's goal of building 3.5 million new homes by 2025. So the purpose of us being here is twofold. Number one, it is going to go through a PowerPoint that is on our website that is just a starting point in our discussion for reforming our regulatory process, our regs for TCAC and CDLAC. It is not in stone. It is not written anywhere. So this is just a listening tour to present some of the ideas for folks who have been writing to us for the last almost year now about what we need to do to streamline, make our agencies more efficient, and again, align with the governor. I want to introduce Jovan Agee, who has really been doing the tireless work since we started. I vacated the heads of TCAC and CDLAC because I really wanted a agency that is working together in parallel, a one-stop shop, understanding that if we are going to address this crisis, we all need to come to the table. It cannot be business as usual. And so Jovan has been kind of the acting director for both while we figure out what our agency has been doing over the last 20 years and what we need to do to move forward in the future. So thank you, Jovan.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Before I get started, I just want to say appreciate the turnout here in Sacramento. We spend a lot of time going to communities, and your participation is extremely important in the conversation that we are embarking on. And so with that, before I turn it over to Anthony and Evan to introduce themselves and to speak briefly about their authorities, I want to give you some quick context and construct for the conversation we'll have today. So essentially what you'll see before you are some suggestions that have been incorporated for conversation as really kind of a launching point for our conversation. What we did was we probed a few what we call frequent flyers that engage our office really since we've been sworn in, and in some instances were engaging us before the treasurer even officially took over, and were bending our ear as relates to what could be done better to improve our services. And so because of that, we said, hey, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. Let's coalesce these ideas. Let's put them in print, and then let's shop them and see what the general public thinks. And so that's where we came up with these ideas. Additionally, we have 6 goals that we've outlined in terms of the Treasurer's Office. What you hear spoken of most frequently is the governor's goals for 3.5 million houses by 2025. The Treasurer stands shoulder to shoulder with the governor in making sure that that happens. But equally as important are her goals. One of the things oftentimes you'll see is an elected official, irrespective of party affiliation, will say a lot of things. But equally or more important is actually seeing their actions. Goals are a good barometer to really know who an elected official is, their value system. And so these 6 goals are a true representation of who Fiona Ma is. And as you can see, to the left of those goals are icons. What we try to do is make this very technical conversation as optically appealing as possible and making it as simple to understand as possible. And so those icons you'll see throughout the PowerPoint presentation will be represented either highlighted or grayed out. The highlight means that those goals are hit within that respective proposal. So in some instances, you'll see anywhere from 3 to 4 goals hit, meaning that 3 or 4 of those goals are being touched on by that presentation. And so with that, I'm going to pause there, allow Anthony Zito to introduce himself, talk a little bit about TCAC, have Evan do the same thing for CDLAC, and then turn it back over to Anthony to begin the presentation.
Thank you. I'm Anthony Zito. I'm Deputy Director at TCAC. For those of you who are not familiar with TCAC, we are the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Allocating Agency for the state of California, so that's federal and state credits. Essentially, the credits are allocated to developers who form a limited partnership with investors, and the sale of those credits results in equity that's used to construct the project and develop the project. And once the project's developed, our compliance section goes out and monitors the projects to make sure that they're meeting the regulatory requirements for a term of 55 years. And as I mentioned, the tax credits, there's 9% and 4% credits. The 4% credits work alongside Evan's group with CDLAC with the tax-exempt bonds. So I'll go ahead and segue to Evan to talk about CDLAC.
Yeah, I'm Evan Cass. I'm with the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. We do the allocation for tax-exempt private activity bonds for California for affordable housing, mainly. And we set the ceiling for the allocation in the beginning of the year, and we draw against that. So it is a set ceiling, so that's what we have to work with.
Okay, since so many of you filled out speaker cards, normally at the other meetings we would go through the PowerPoint for a little bit and then break, but obviously many of you have read the PowerPoint and have come with some sort of response or comments or suggestions, so we're just going to go into the speaker cards. Alicia, Sebastian. Yes, no? Okay, why don't... Okay. All right, okay, so Alicia, Sebastian.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks so much. Alicia Sebastian. I'm the Associate Director with the California Coalition for Rural Housing. Many of our members have been to other listening sessions. Some are here today, and we echo their comments. We've been really grateful for the ongoing engagement and partnership with the Treasurer and her office, and we look forward to future discussions. In rural communities, there are few, if any, local resources for funding development of affordable housing. And we still struggle with comparable development and operation costs to those of our urban counterparts. Rural communities also must build comparatively smaller projects with often larger units that cannot carry debt and pencil out to the scale of urban projects. Therefore, 9% tax credits are the primary tool for affordable housing development for the vast majority of rural communities. Our members are serving rural communities, farm worker communities, and American tribal communities, and these 9% tax credits are the #1 tool in these spaces. We applaud the Treasurer's focus on improving the efficiency of the state's LIHTC program. However, we believe making potentially radical changes to this program is misguided. Instead of trying to address the cost challenges facing the state's huge residential construction industry by making changes to the relatively tiny 9% program, the state should address the primary cost drivers in the overall market, including CEQA abuses, the cost of land, building code requirements and limitations, burdensome local government fees, and high labor costs driven by a lack of subcontractors and construction workers in the rural labor force, and default to prevailing wages that are out of sync with rural cost of living. It is vital that we preserve the quality and affordability goals of the tax credit program, even as we work to increase production and constrain costs. The tax credit program should prioritize, 1, the creation of safe, stable, well-constructed, and well-maintained affordable homes with deep income targeting for our most vulnerable Californians. 2, building locations, designs, and densities that are appropriate to local communities. 3, balancing cost efficiencies with ensuring quality design and services that instill pride in developers, residents, and communities. 4, building power and wealth of residents and communities by providing true housing choice with opportunities for movement to racially integrated and high-resource neighborhoods while continuing critical investment in underserved communities. And 5, incentivizing developers and communities with a consistent, transparent, and efficient process to secure tax credits and state funds to build a reliable pipeline. The 9% LIHTC program has been and should continue to serve as a critical tool to equitably transform all of California's communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. I'm Bill Paveo. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just have a few brief remarks. I was the former executive director at TCAC and am currently representing the Sacramento Housing Alliance in this forum. And I just have a few remarks. Most of them are kind of process related. Read through your PowerPoint, have lots of detailed feedback on each and every specific recommendation. But for purposes of today, I would simply recommend maybe taking a giant step back and being a little more inclusive in consulting the broader community. You've probably already got a sense that, man, there are lots of different interests and expertise in the large affordable housing development community. That plays itself out in the 9% competition, which is still very competitive. And each of those parties has their own policy emphasis and frankly, interest. From the PowerPoint, it looks like one portion of your community has been pretty thoroughly consulted. Those look like they're reflected in those ideas, but there are vast other parts of the community, especially the nonprofit development community. I would urge you to really plug into those regional and statewide organizations and get feedback as you formulate your ideas. I also would say that the 9% program, which has evolved over the years, really, as you can probably tell, is a balancing of lots of different public policy objectives, all of which generate great outcomes. And so as you begin to tinker with a given facet, it will ripple through that system. And careful thought and really kind of a data-based approach. What is the existing problem? Can you quantify that? Here's a proposed solution. What metrics are we going to use to see if that succeeded? So I would urge those kinds of processes as you generate ideas and roll them out, and I will submit my written remarks on the PowerPoint specifically later. Thank you.
Name together. Yes, my name is Holly Wonder Stiles. I'm the Director of Housing Development for Mutual Housing California. I'm also, Mutual Housing California is also a member of the Sacramento Housing Alliance. Our concern is that in reviewing the proposed revisions, our concern is that without the correct analysis, we're not going to find the right solutions. For example, is it really the case that the current 9% tiebreaker leads to smaller projects? I can tell you that Mutual Housing just completed a small 39-unit, 9% project as the second phase of a 100-unit project. And I can tell you with certainty that we did not duplicate our tax credit transaction costs in order to get a better tiebreaker. We did that because of how the geographic apportionment limits project size. With regard to costs, it's important to note that they are increasing for all types of housing, not just those produced with 9% credits. So it can't be the 9% credit that's the main driver. Neither can it be the inclusion of local funding in the tiebreaker. Let's remember that while several jurisdictions have recently passed local bond measures and sales taxes for housing, that is far from the case everywhere. Where local funds remain limited in the Central Valley and other parts of the state, no one is increasing costs so they can ask for more local funds to get a better tiebreaker. Such a strategy simply wouldn't work. The treasurer might also be advised to help us address some of the real cost drivers: land use barriers, fiscalized land use policies, local impact fees, We've seen those as high as $30,000 a unit in some communities, not to mention the rapidly rising costs for labor and materials. Meanwhile, we should protect the compatibility of both the 9% and the 4% credits with the Prop 1 programs that favor lowest affordability, so that those with the greatest unmet housing needs are not forgotten in the push to increase overall production. Thank you.
We all came in together. So I'm Kathy Kress. I'm the president of the board of the Sacramento Housing Alliance, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. We'll keep our comments brief because we will be providing written comments. And I just want to say we really appreciate that this is the second round of listening sessions that you have done, and we really appreciate that. But we do feel that the comments that are reflected in your slides don't appear to reflect all of the critical stakeholders, and so that any effort to make significant changes should include the broader range of our stakeholder communities, which is all of the regions, including rural, which includes nonprofit as well as for-profit developers, but as well as people who are actually impacted by the programs, the people who we're actually trying to serve, ensuring that those opportunities to participate in this process, specifically since the programs are potentially being changed so much. But fundamentally, we're also very concerned when we look at your overview of goals that there is no clear goal to address the most critical housing needs, those at risk of homelessness and those with extremely low income, at a point in time when our point-in-time counts all over the state have just shown a significant increase in homelessness. The fact that those issues are not reflected in the goals is really troubling to us, and we think you really need to step back and think about how we can use these programs to fundamentally change that dynamic so that we are changing the trajectory and ending homelessness. And this program can be fundamental to doing that. Also, we're really worried about the efforts to promote cost efficiency should not come at the expense of vulnerable populations. So reducing accessibility requirements for seniors and individuals with disabilities is not the way to get at those programs. So we appreciate that you're coming out and listening to us, but we really look forward to the opportunity to having working groups or something where we have an opportunity to meaningfully engage in the discussion about how to strengthen and make this program work for all of our needs. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Treasurer, and the rest of the folks on this panel. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Littlehale, and I'm proud to be a representative for the Carpenters Union in Northern California. We have members here from the greater Sacramento Valley. And part of the message here today is that of something that I think you already know, which is that it doesn't just take land and finance and entitlements to build housing, it takes workers to build housing. And in addition to being builders of affordable housing as well as market rate housing, Carpenters Union members have also gone to bat for housing by knocking on thousands of doors and making thousands of phone calls in favor of ballot measures that have raised billions of dollars for financing affordable housing statewide. So the Treasurer's regulation changes, we would note, and we've submitted in some preliminary comments and look forward to an engaged process going forward, whatever they may be, should not incentivize developers to use contractors that pay workers at rates that actually would qualify the workers for state and federal housing subsidies. Regulation changes should incentivize developers to require contractors to invest in and develop the workforce that we so desperately need to meet the housing production goals that are shared by the governor and the treasurer and the controller all together as part of the grand coalition in favor of more housing production. Housing contractors desperately need more skilled workers. Skilled workers won't materialize magically. They need to be developed. No programs can compare to joint labor management apprenticeship programs and developing not only a skilled workforce, but also lifting people out of working poor jobs into the middle class, which relieves some of the pressure for the demand for housing subsidies from both the federal and state governments. It also furthers equity goals. 70% of the apprentices in the Northern California Carpenters apprenticeship programs are people of color. And their outcomes will speak for themselves in terms of reaching equity and prosperity goals.
Stephen Nodum.
Good afternoon, Treasurer. My name is Stephen Nodum, and if you recall, we were in your office about a week ago. And at that time, the state director, who is busy with Secretary Perdue, who is in town, would have been here, but she suggested we will have a comment, and so I'm just going to go over some of those issues. I am the Multifamily Housing Program Director from USDA Rural Development. Our main concern is in the area of the rural set-aside, which has become problematic in us gathering all the federal funds that we can find and bringing subsidy, and yet the projects are left untouched in the end. We're providing you a written comment, and we would like to see that we're treated as a housing partner with, CTCAC rather than as a sponsor that they can regulate. One of the key areas of concern has been the federal definition of rural. As you know, Congress enacts these laws, and they're codified in the Housing Act. And so yet when we define rural as Congress intended it, we run into a roadblock of, mismatch idea of what it should be. The other portion we're concerned is the exercise of trying to devalue the rental assistance, which assures, backed up by the full faith and credit of the United States, that nobody living in those units that qualify should pay more than 30%. Affordability is a key driver for us. And yet, the staff has recently been going in there trying to come up with their own definition. We think, I was looking back in the history, back in the 1996, that there was an MOU between USDA Rural Development, that time it was called a different name, and CTCAC. Things worked very well. So when we get our allocations, there was a designated RHS set aside within the rural set aside, and that functions very well. We would like to see that restored so we can, eliminate this error of head burden while we're leaving federal dollars that should go towards developing more affordable housing on the table. I'll stop right there.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Nick Young. I'm with the Association for Energy Affordability. We're a sustainability and energy consulting organization based in the East Bay. And I just want to speak briefly about electrification and building decarbonization. So building electrification is the elimination of fossil fuels, mostly natural gas, from our buildings. And it's not just to meet our climate goals, but it's also critically to improve the health of residents and communities. Gas appliances, particularly naturally vented ones such as wall furnaces and gas stoves, are a significant source of indoor air pollution, as well as a source of potential carbon monoxide poisoning for residents. And one of my colleagues was working at a project doing combustion safety testing and actually got carbon monoxide poisoning from one of these appliances. There are electric appliances of comparable cost and performance that improve air quality and health for residents by eliminating fossil fuels in our homes and our buildings. And though building all electric may not be what most are accustomed to in California, building all electric is straightforward in new construction, and it can be done in retrofit projects as well at cost with mixed fuel construction. And there are developers in this room who have completed all electric affordable multifamily projects in California. All electric affordable housing is already being built in our state. I've worked on these projects. They don't break the bank, and they're the right thing to do.
This year, right now, dozens of California communities are looking at REACH codes to encourage all-electric new construction and in some cases ban gas connections in new buildings. I was just at a meeting in the East Bay with communities looking to do this. So I would encourage TCAC and CDLAC to award competitive points for projects that are pursuing all-electric new construction as a way to earn sustainable building methods credits, as well as potentially threshold basis boosts like our other sustainable building strategies. Going all-electric is a great way to do that. And then to consider changing the energy metric for existing building rehabs from a backward-looking TDV metric to a forward-looking greenhouse gas-based metric to align with California's overall state goals for decarbonization of our building stock. Thank you.
My name is Onassis. I'm part of the Carpenters Union. Before I was part of the Carpenters Union, I lived in a world where prevailing wage did not exist, apprenticeship did not exist, and for people like me who come over here to get an opportunity, unfortunately not all opportunities are created equal. We take advantage of the opportunities, but I would go to work hard, and ultimately my paycheck was based on someone's personal discretion. And 99% of the time it was very little. With us being in a housing crisis and needing more construction workers, I think we're opening the door for that cycle to continue if we don't implement prevailing wage. I mean, for me, an example, now I own a home and I'm able to provide more for my family. And prevailing wage, it's like an aspect to create a factor for the voiceless out here. Like right now it's 3 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday, and most of them can't be here right now because they're probably like 2 to 3 hours away at the job with no insurance. And we have to think about the voiceless when we make these decisions. You know, people like me will come here for a better life, and with prevailing wage, it will help them a lot. Thanks.
I'm Karen Mulvaney. I chair the Sacramento Regional Advisory Committee for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And my daughter lives in an accessory dwelling unit in rural El Dorado County, which was absolutely critical in enabling her to transition to affordable housing and independent living. And just a few comments on the state of housing. In rural communities, we're seeing rural affordable housing collapse. And one of the things you may not be aware of is how fire insurance rates are escalating, going from, for a typical home under $2,000 a year to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a year. And when you translate that to a rent, that means an increase of $500 a month. Which is going to take any house from affordable to not affordable any longer. So my fear is that these kinds of issues are going to end up taking away one affordable housing unit for every new one that you're spending money to build. And so playing defense to address some of these issues and at least preserve the affordable housing stock that we currently have is really going to be critical to making a gain in affordable housing. And that's especially an issue for people who are not able to work. They typically will seek out affordable housing units in rural areas because they don't need to be near a transportation hub. They don't need to be near a job-rich environment. And those are the types of folks who lived in paradise. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is areas that look like paradise and are heavily populated by seniors. There's a 50% increase in the number of homes for sale there because those people are having to leave. They cannot afford to live in their homes anymore due to these kinds of issues. And on top of that, we have PG&E cutting off electricity, not for a few hours at a time, but for days at a time. And people who are seniors just simply can't live in those kinds of environments. And so this adds to the burden of costs because of the need for regeneration of backup generation, which is, by the way, going to have to be propane fired or gasoline fired. If you're all electric, you're really in trouble. So in rural communities, access to other sources of power are actually becoming even more important. Lastly, with respect to people with developmental disabilities or really any disability who are on SSI in particular, they only are eligible for SSI if they're unable to participate in substantially gainful activity. In other words, this year that means earn at least $1,220 a month. So for them, being near job-rich environments is really not helpful. So again, the importance of affordable housing. And my last plug will be we need to ensure that for all those people who are on IHSS and SSI, that their staff also have access to affordable housing. We moved from the Bay Area to a rural environment because of staff, because we saw that staff could never afford to live in the Bay Area on the wages that they get paid. And now we're seeing their housing get destroyed too. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Edward Plan. I'm a facilitator for Department of Developmental Services Client Advisory Committee. I'm here today on behalf of Rick Hodgkins, who is a member of the committee. Rick is a young man with developmental disability and also visual impairment. As a young person, he has two particular concerns about affordable housing, and one of them is regulations that prevent people who are full-time students from accessing affordable housing. And second one is one that, let me see. And the other one is continuous work history. That person needs to provide at least 3 months in pay stubs. About 40% by some estimate of people with developmental disabilities don't have jobs or or underemployed. So Rick is asking you, Treasurer Ma, and people who are on the panel today to consider ease those regulations so people with developmental disabilities do not have to jump, such high barriers to access affordable housing.
My name is Robert Coble. I'm with Sacramento Tenants Union. We need affordable, accessible housing being built in California. So any consideration that you should have that in mind. And we also need to do some of these vacant properties that are like apartment complexes that are totally vacant. A lot of them are in disadvantaged neighborhoods. We ought to do something about that. Get those people, get people renting in those properties. Thank you.
Treasurer, board members, please reach out to the renters. This took 10 years to create this problem. It's probably going to take 10 years to get out of it. But accessibility, meaning that when you build something, that it is accessible for the disability community. Seniors, you have a generation coming that needs accessibility. You've done some efforts in funding that, but one of the things it seems like you should be able to figure out, accountability. In other words, the legislator 2 years ago put housing bills out and watched a year later to see what impact they had. You doing bonds, doing these other elements. Beyond the regulation change, there needs to be some oversight and review and remembering how you got here and making sure it doesn't happen again. California makes some of the best houses, but it costs. and determining affordable at not 20,000, what is it? Not even 50,000 is what is needed for housing.
William Leach.
Good afternoon, Treasurer and panelists. Number one, I'm super excited about the alignment with the Governor's office and the Treasurer's office. I find that refreshing. There's a lot of resources for developers to use, but often they're under multiple houses. And the fact that you have a commitment to align those resources is just amazing. Number two, these goals are admirable. And I want to point out, though, every one of these goals comes with a trade-off. If you want to increase production, you're going to have to cut some red tape. If you're going to want to contain costs, people are going to have to sharpen their pencils. There's a trade-off that comes with every good policy goal. And when you're in a season that calls for X production, you're going to have to take some of the pain that comes with that, whether it's dialing back a requirement or dialing back affordability. And those trade-offs, I think you just have to weigh in the circumstance that you're in. Of course, I'd never want to get lower affordability. Of course, I would never want to reduce quality or square footage or any of those things. But in the environment that we're in, what is called for, I think it's going to be a tough discussion. And I really appreciate all the listening that you've done and even putting together people's ideas and getting other people's feedback from it is a huge step in the right direction. I applaud that, and I look forward to being part of the process.
Hello, my name is Melissa Peacock, and I am a resident at Phoenix Park Apartments. Here in Sacramento, I have learned that you are considering taking away the 4% bond requirements. The owners must provide social services to residents in affordable housing. I strongly object, and here's why. Before I became a resident at Phoenix Park Apartments, my family and I were living in a homeless shelter for women and children. From there, I went into transitional housing and then moved into permanent housing at Phoenix Park, which provided resident services for us. Resident services has helped me to build my resume for work and taught me how to budget my money so I can save. Life Steps or resident services has been a big part of my life. Last year, I did not have enough money to buy Christmas presents for my children after paying my bills. Life Steps adopted my family through their Adopt a Family Christmas program, and it's thanks to them my kids had a wonderful Christmas. Life Steps provides many wonderful programs, and without resident services, a lot of people would be lost. Without them, I honestly don't know how I would succeed in life. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Vernon Hills and I am here to speak on behalf of Life Steps, a social service provider that serves over 32,000 affordable homes in California. Thank you so much for supporting the forum today and listening to feedback. It warms our heart that new leadership is so impassioned by building more housing units. Housing stability is the key to all lives living with dignity. The regulation currently for both the 4% and the 9% tax credit, which supports social services from our perspective, has become the beauty of transformation. Together with for-profits, non-profits, governmental agencies, and social services, we have mastered the thread of breaking the cycle of poverty. We have a diverse population, which our average family is a female with 3 kids, and many of our properties serve our diversified cultures. Our summer reading program has 98% of our children preventing the summer slide, and thus creating a national model of success for others to do the same. We have developed a highly successful program for housing stabilization, where a social worker is on site helping residents who have issued that threaten their tenancy. We are proud to report that since 2001, we have had an 85% success rate at keeping people in homes so they do not have the trauma of homelessness, which is huge. Combine that with the financial educational program where 92% of our residents are still in housing with only one $400 impact because of a 6-month financial education program designed to empower residents. In 2018 alone, 794 of our residents increased their savings account. Part of our housing stability program focuses on budgeting and helping residents learn skills to remove debt and building savings. Just in 2018, of the residents who moved out to our communities, 12.5% bought homes. This is literally changing the cycle of poverty by allowing residents to begin build equity. Resident Services effectively provides crisis management and medication, critical skill building classes and workshops, after school programming and more. Also, Resident Services allow seniors to gracefully age in place while generating major cost savings for the government. Premature placements and skilled nursing facilities are avoided, and remission into hospital emergency rooms are prevented. And in closing, I just want to say that a third-party Leading Age conducted a study that showed service on site reduced hospital admissions among residents by 18%. To be clear, for Life Steps, alone removing the 4% service amenities threatens more than 25,000 units. We strongly advocate for keeping the service requirements for 4% bond deals for all Californians. Let's break the cycle of poverty by increasing housing units while ensuring longitudinal service continue. I'd like to close by saying how much we appreciate our partnerships and that together we can continue to work together for a greater good in keeping people housed and remain self-sufficient. This is, of course, only works by the collaborative nature that California regulatory agencies encourage by supporting all aspects of housing. Thank you.
Welcome to all of you. Good to see everybody here again. My name is Pat Sablehouse. I'm the Executive Director of the California Council for Affordable Housing, and we've been tracking the regulatory change process here for about 32 years now. The program was implemented in 1987, as you will all recall. We did one of the first tax credit 9% projects in El River in Mendocino County, and I'm happy to report that that 40-unit project is still alive and well and is still serving the people in that community. But what we've noticed in tracking the changes over all of these years is that the tax credit program, as the director in Arizona said, is sort of like a Christmas tree, and each year it gathers more and more ornaments to the point where the Christmas tree is so overloaded with ornaments that sometimes we lose track of what the real purpose of the program is. I mean, we agreed that almost everything you can think of that's been imposed upon the program has a good policy behind it. But you always, I think, as William Leach was saying, you have to compare that to the production goals that you're trying to reach, and just how far you can stretch the tax credit dollars and still reach a reasonable accommodation for everyone that's involved. So again, we have submitted our comments. We're not going to go over those again here today. Meaning the California Council, is appreciative of the efforts, Treasurer Maul, that you're making and spending all of this time burdening yourselves up and down the state. But I think you're right, that's the way to get at the core issues that have to be discussed and debated with everyone. and we are fully supportive of the goals and objectives that you've laid out. We know that there's not perfection there, and that you'll wean through all of these and get to the perfection that you think is reasonable, and that will allow you to do what the governor has said clearly in his budget message, that you get the $500 million in state credits this year, but next year we've all together have to look at whether or not there's a way of reaching cost efficiency that the governor has mandated as a prerequisite for going forward in the next 4 or 5 years with the additional credits. So thank you again for taking the time to hear all of us.
Jack Gardner.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Gardner. I'm president of the John Stewart Company. We're an active statewide developer and manager of tax credit housing and all other forms of subsidized affordable housing throughout the state. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the current proposals and to submit ideas for achieving our collective goals of producing as many high-quality affordable housing units as possible while best meeting the needs of our state's low-income residents. That being said, I do believe that some of the assumptions upon which today's proposals are based, especially those relating to the longer-term proposal regarding tipping the tiebreaker in favor of lower costs, are flawed. I'll share a couple of those with you. The fact that RDAs have been eliminated does not mean that local funding's role in the tiebreaker is no longer relevant, especially as we have worked very hard to successfully generate billions of new dollars for affordable housing through recent local and state bond initiatives. And while the tiebreaker allows higher costs to projects to be funded, as it should, it does not by itself increase costs or motivate developers to reduce the size of their projects. Based on my personal experience as a developer and my many conversations with my industry and movement mates, that is simply not the case. In addition, the 82% of attendees at last year's TCAC forums, which I attended, may have agreed that the tiebreaker should measure return on investment. I support that. But I don't think that they were agreeing that the only or even primary form of return to be measured should be low costs. I know I wasn't agreeing to that, but maybe I was part of the 18%. Instead, quality of construction, resident amenities and services, depth of affordability, location in high need, high opportunity areas, and other public benefits are all factors that should be considered forms of ROI and factored into the tiebreaker. Projects are getting smaller and production has been declining because construction costs are skyrocketing. All development costs are skyrocketing. LIHTC pricing is down and no one's money is stretching as far. But it is not because of the tiebreaker itself. If the goal is to lower costs and increase efficiency, which I think is a very valid goal and one I support wholeheartedly, then I urge TCAC and the Treasurer's Office to work with us to tackle the true drivers of escalating development costs, as well as various QAP, HCD, and other state and local requirements that increase project costs themselves. That is something I really, really hope can happen. I'm deeply concerned that emphasizing lower costs in the tiebreaker would result in lower quality units being developed and pushing their development into lower cost areas where the need for affordable housing is less than it is in high cost, high employment, high homelessness areas. That would have the unfortunate double effect of first tipping California's already abysmal jobs housing balance in the wrong direction, leading to longer commutes by low-income households as they travel to their jobs, generating more traffic congestion and more greenhouse gases just as the state is working hard to reduce those. Second, I'm concerned that it would exacerbate the state's homelessness crisis by shifting tax credit development to areas with smaller homeless populations. These are two very serious negative consequences that need to be carefully studied before significant changes are made to the tiebreaker. I'll summarize briefly. I'm submitting written comments. I don't need to beat them to death here. I just respectfully urge the Treasurer, TCAC, your office, to conduct a more in-depth analysis of the true drivers of high costs and insufficient housing production in California before making significant long-term changes to a tiebreaker, which has successfully motivated high levels of local investment and the production of thousands of high-quality, high public benefit housing units in the high need and high opportunity areas where they are so desperately needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity and doing your listening sessions. Patty Uplinger, I'm from Sacramento's Self-Help Housing. I almost said Housing Alliance. We are a member of Sacramento Housing Alliance, and ditto those first three speakers, Alicia, Bill, and Holly. And I also want to second Rich Hodgkins' comments through Ed Plon today, that I do know examples of people. I am also from Housing Now and Lanterman Housing Alliance, and we work with people with developmental. It's kind of counterproductive to what we want to do. We want people to increase their income so they don't have the need anymore. So my statement is basically just that I want you to do more, what you can, to strengthen targeting housing for people that are extremely low incomes. Thank you for the opportunity. And accessibility, sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm with Mid-Penn Housing, and we're a nonprofit developer that works throughout the Bay Area. I would have gone to San Jose, but honestly, I think it's faster to drive up to Sacramento with the way Bay Area traffic is. There was some statements in the slides that we're talking about what the problems were that really just didn't match the way we think of the problems. And I think we have a lot of problems and we agree on them, but what the solutions are, I think we have some very different ideas about. And I don't think that the changes to the tiebreaker are going to solve some of these problems. We're very concerned about rising costs, and we're certainly seeing that. It's making it very difficult to make projects work. And we'd like to really work on some real solutions to that. Things that we can look at in the TCAC regs that may be driving costs, things that maybe the TCAC regs could help us with in terms of controlling some requirements that local agencies are putting on us. We'd love to, one of the things, we think that new construction technologies is certainly something that should be looked at. It's really not there yet, and it's something that we would really encourage you not to put incentives in the regulations for, because of there's just unproven technologies there. But it's something that we need to really be figuring out because we think it will be a solution. Another statement that was made in the slides was that the tiebreaker was leading to smaller projects, which are more inefficient. We agree that smaller projects are more inefficient, but it's not the tiebreaker that's doing it. And if anything's doing it, it's the size of the regional allocations that are within in the regulations. And 6 of those geographic apportionment areas have less than $5 million in total credit, which means that in most rounds you can't get the maximum credit amount, which means that's what's limiting project size. So we would propose that in some of those regions that you only do 1 round a year, so that you could do larger projects in those geographic areas. Was one solution to consider. And I'm sorry, I'm over time, but I just also want to say that I think coming from the Bay Area, where we have raised literally $2 billion in local bond money, we have to be doing this in alignment with our public partners. They have great incentive to raise this money, and the last thing we want to do is disincentivize more local money being raised, because it's what's really driving production and allowing us to build more units. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment today. I'm a financial consultant with community economics, and CEI has 40 years of experience assisting nonprofit developers with their affordable housing tax credit projects. We've worked on over 800 properties throughout California and in other states. So that means we've worked on a lot of tax credit applications throughout many, many years. And we will be providing detailed comments on the various proposals. We do think there are some good ideas there in terms of streamlining the programs. But we do have concerns, as well as others in the room, about the proposed changes to the 9% tiebreaker. Over years of working on tax credit projects, we've seen many tiebreakers come and go. So, and we've seen unintended consequences from those tiebreakers. So, for example, a tiebreaker based on basis per bedroom. People started building a lot of buildings with 4-bedroom units. And a tiebreaker based on cost per unit. People built small units. And a lottery system. No one knew if they were going to get funded or not. You know, a cost-based tiebreaker with a standard deviation, no one could understand it. So, you know, over the years, there have been a lot of tiebreakers that resulted in unintended consequences, and we're concerned that the primary idea out there now may have that unintended consequence problem because of the multitude of adjustments that would be required to recognize all of the special project conditions, location variation. So we think that could be extremely difficult to get right without some crazy shenanigans going on. We also, I'll try to wrap it up here. We do think that you should focus on the 4% program at this moment, especially since there will be this large wave of state tax credits coming. We really need to figure out that at this moment, as well as issues with reaching the bond allocation cap. And we think you could also do streamlining. For example, in Washington State, we work on projects in Washington State. In the past, they've had to submit one application in Washington State. They get their tax credits, they get their state dollars, they get their bonds. One application, one allocation. That would be a dream.
Thank you very much, Treasurer, for having us. My name is Lauren Maddock, and I'm speaking as both a financial consultant for the California Housing Partnership, but also as a rent board commissioner for the city of Richmond. As rent board commissioner, I can tell you that my constituents are very concerned about the reduction of affordable housing with the removal of the 10% at 50% AMI. Most people don't understand that LIHTC housing is not subsidized housing, and even the modest rent increases that the TCAC program allows, people on fixed income simply cannot afford those small increases. So I encourage you to think twice. I don't think that the production of affordable housing is going to slow down by continuing to serve people at the 50% set aside. Putting on my financial consultant hat, we do agree that the cost of construction is out of control in the state of California. We have many clients in the room. Some have very large allocations from the state, and we've been hard pressed to find investors who are willing to invest $20, $30, $50 million in a single project, and that's just the tax credits. Looking at the state's website in 2018, TCAC funded approximately 20,000 units. When you take all of the equity programs, state credits, federal credits, it averages out to only $40,000 per unit. That is far short of the cost of construction. As a financial consultant, I can tell you we then have to go to the other state programs, and we're very grateful that they exist, but it's incredibly complicated. It's complex, it's uncertain, and so we encourage you to look beyond just the 9% program and to think about the problem in a much broader sense, taking into account CDLAC, taking into account TCAC, CalHFA, and seeing if you can work together, as Diana said, in a consolidated manner. The state of New York does a similar program. Washington does it the same way. I think that's where you can start to see shovels in the ground much quicker. There's very limited dollars out there, but we need to think twice about just working on the 9% program. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm Nehemiah Stone, Stone Energy Associates, and let me start by saying, Anthony, this is not on your dime. I'm here on my own time, okay? I'm a consultant to the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. I want to encourage you to align as much as you can with the rest of the other state agencies and their goals. And the Energy Commission is moving towards carbon neutral construction and zero energy construction. That's part of addressing the climate crisis that we have. The other part is resiliency. So I would like also to urge you to address resiliency. I believe that the Treasurer's Office should fund a study to see what the resiliency issues are in the affordable housing in California. Those areas next to the coast that might get inundated, the areas and the urban wildland interface. I urge you to give points in the 9% to require that builders have a plan, a resiliency plan, what they're going to do to make sure that their tenants will have water and power and will be protected from the ravages of climate crisis. For the tenants themselves, that would include having cool rooms so that when it is extremely hot, they have a place to go on campus. It also means having power on site, and having a generator that's great, but that's all a generator can do. Having solar and battery backup can do a lot more, and it can help make the community more resilient. I have a number of other comments. I'll provide them in writing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Kadani behind the post. I'm here on behalf of the Dry Creek Rancheria, an Indian tribe with about 1,200 members in Sonoma County. We have just some basic things that we'd like to see. One is that you retain the tribal apportionment. I think it's very important, and we've seen some great success with tribes like Coyote Valley. The second thing that I'd like to mention is that we believe that apportionment should be increased because you're going to see a lot more tribal applications coming in over the next 3 or 4 years. I go to housing conferences across California and the Southwest, and a lot of tribes are gearing up and putting in applications now. The third thing I'd like to discuss is, or mention, is that it would be very helpful if you move the tribal apportionment out of the rural set-aside. We think that would be beneficial for both the tribes and the rural communities. We certainly appreciate the success that CCRH has had in helping the tribes in California, and we'd like to continue that relationship and also probably work a little closer with the rural communities around us. That's basically the 3 things that I would hope to emphasize. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Anatoly Geverluk on behalf of Carpenters Union. So I came to the United States 15 years ago as an immigrant. So I worked on the multiple project, earning $8 an hour. And I was at the back then, I could not afford a house, but I was fortunate enough to enroll in 4-year apprenticeship, carpenter apprenticeship program, and then I finished it with honor achievement. For the first time in my life, somebody said to me, I mean, you have a talent. And it was kind of emotional to me. So I take in pride everything what I've done. So I was able to pay for my wife education, earning area standards wages. I was now she worked at VA hospital in Mather. I was able to bring 2 families from Ukraine, sponsor them. So we actually achieved American dream. So, and I strongly believe, earning area standards wages can make more changes and more dream going to be achieved in our community. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, Treasurer Ma. I'm Pedro Galvan with the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. We are a 40-year-old affordable housing advocacy organization, and in the past we've worked very closely with your office on a number of affordable housing regulations, and we in general are very appreciative of your work and of also the listening tour that you have embarked on to get our feedback. My comments echo many of the comments made earlier that we agree that cost is a major issue for all real estate construction in California, but we think that the focus exclusively on the 9% low-income housing tax credit represents a relatively small market of the overall construction industry in California, and that we should look at construction costs more broadly, and that we should focus instead on streamlining the state's fragmented system for funding the development of affordable housing and address the primary cost drivers in the overall market, including the lack of subcontractors and construction workers in the labor force, CEQA abuses, and recent changes to Title 24 and other building code requirements and limitations. We also think that the state has been clear that its highest priority is to put housing in high-need areas in every region that are close to jobs and transit and where our homeless crisis is most acute. We should not turn back from those commitments. The proposed regulatory changes will collectively incentivize developers to build lower density, less accessible buildings on the edges of our communities as opposed to job centers close to transit. We should use the regulations as an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to building affordable homes in high-need areas close to jobs and transit. We also think that self-help approaches by local elected officials to raise funds at the ballot box provide a critical gap funding for affordable housing. I don't think California suffers from an abundance of affordable housing funding, and anything that we can do should incentivize local efforts. In the Bay Area, we've been leading the way by raising over $2 billion locally, and we think that the regulations should also continue to prioritize local funding for affordable housing. And finally, we think that making such big changes to the overall TCAC regulations will sow confusion and uncertainty at a time when the state is gearing up to invest billions of new funding through Props 1 and 2. We think that the transparency of the current system and reinforcing the existing structures while curbing abuses should be maintained in order to get us to producing the affordable housing that our state so desperately needs. Thank you for your time.
Madam Treasurer, esteemed panel, Efren Carrillo with Burbank Housing, an affordable housing nonprofit developer out of Santa Rosa, predominantly doing work in Sonomas and Napa counties. Simply here to reiterate some of the points that Pedro and our partners at Nonprofit Housing Association and many of our sister agencies have already reiterated. One point that has not been touched on that we certainly want to bring up to the panel's attention is the fire recovery and rebuild effort that we're experiencing in the North Bay and across the state. As many of you know, in 2017, we were hit with wildfires in Sonoma and Napa counties. We are struggling with the full recovery and rebuild effort and would encourage at least some consideration in looking at the possibilities of using and utilizing tax credits for recovery and rebuild efforts. We've seen them work in other places, and we certainly feel that there's at least a space for consideration here in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Ma, for assembling this panel. My name is Russell Rawlings. I am the Director of Advocacy at Resources for Independent Living, the independent living center serving Sacramento and Yolo County. And we'd like to recommend that the decision to reduce the number or the ADA percentage on LIHTC, low-income tax credit properties, that number not be reduced. There's currently a requirement for 50% and a proposal to reduce to 10 for fully ADA units. This is a problem as we're growing, the number of seniors and people with disabilities in the state. We would also encourage more aggressive, honestly, look at including universal design practices and scoring when building developments using, designed for affordable housing. And also second, that LIHTC is not the only tool that we can use, but it's one, and we need to make it fully accessible.
Any other cards? This is my last card.
Last but not least, hi, Rich Wallach, also with Burbank Housing, here to speak on behalf of both our organization, and Pedro, thank you for your comments as well. I wanted to speak specifically around some of the things that Burbank and other affordable housing developers are already doing to reduce costs, knowing that there are many aspects of these things that can be addressed. Designing to achieve the highest yield for parcel zoning, avoiding structured parking unless implementing it achieves a yield that justifies the cost. Negotiate streamlined parking requirements, taking into account actual historical usage for the demographic. For example, senior housing has a lower ratio of cars than family, mixed use, utilizing business parking for visitor parking in the evenings. Utilizing general contractors early in the process, during the design process to navigate through the design process with cost controls in mind. Using larger buildings to garner efficiencies of shared amenities and systems, including more homes served per community space, elevators, laundry area, utility stubs, and waste systems. Negotiating with planning departments for communal outdoor space in lieu of individual outdoor spaces. Negotiate with jurisdictions to reduce the amount of off-site infrastructure that is unrelated to the project. Examples are off-site roadways, walkways, bike paths, utilities, and traffic control that the wider community should fund, not the affordable housing project. Minimize excessive building articulation that planning departments crave, but adds greatly to cost. Reusing of unit plans and building layouts to save on design costs, and where possible, avoid ducted HVAC systems that add greatly to first cost. The onerous commissioning requirements and the energy codes make ducted systems enormously expensive. Codes are changing that will take some of this efficiency away. And finally, simpler, sturdy finishes that provide durability with an affordable first cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Watkins.
As you know, many of us have projects that have been stalled because of the increase in construction cost. And those of us who do 4% projects, I think, are most negatively affected by that because we just are. The 9% at least ratchet up with the cost of construction a little bit. I was very excited about $500 million available in state credits, but I'm kind of disappointed now that it could be a year from now. I mean, I could be wrong, but the timeline that you have for getting those credits out means a lot of us are going to be sitting waiting with projects that could be under construction, could produce units, but we're waiting for a process that if there's anything you could do to emphasize fixing the 4% program to make it as efficient as possible and getting those credits in the hands of people by trying to do over-the-counter allocation as soon as possible in that $500 million, and then take your year to think about how you spend the next year's allocation of those. If you really want some housing produced, you need to get those credits out, not take 8 months, 10 months, a year thinking about how to do it. It's possible that maybe you need to stall your 9% deliberations about changes and put all your focus on getting those 4% credits out. That's what you should do if you want to do something to impact the housing need.
All right, so given the hour, we're going to jump to the next step in the process as it relates to the regulation changes. But as we go there, I want to reflect on a couple things that are just kind of overarching messages and themes that have come out, I think, over the course of the conversation that I think will be helpful as we think about this process moving forward. And the first I would say is we are in a moment of crisis. And I think if we correlate this to where we were 10 years ago in the state, in terms of the budget, when you look at what Jerry Brown did, a lot of what he was saying, there were fears, there was misunderstanding, there was mischaracterization. He took a lot of flack for what he was attempting to do. But then you fast forward sort of 10 years later, and you see this momentum shift from going from a $22 billion deficit to now enjoying a $28 billion deficit. And now people are, surplus, sorry. I don't want to mess up his legacy. So you see this shift, but the point is he displayed leadership. And sometimes that means that we can't get everything we want at the beginning, but we have to be responsible and figure out what do we tackle first, come up with a plan to figure out how do we create the path forward to get us out of this crisis. And I think if nothing else, we have to admit, if there was nothing wrong with the system, we wouldn't be here. And so we have to figure out how do we assemble a team. Please engage us. We have not sort of closed the door to one stakeholder community versus the other. We have been, I would just say we've been disproportionately lobbied by one faction of the developer community than another, but that does not mean we are not listening to the other side of the community. So with that being said, we will look to assemble a team, a working group. We're trying to figure out if it'll be one centralized working group or should it be regional that we engage. But in that, you will have your chance to actually provide solutions. Let me repeat that. An opportunity to provide solutions. The next step, we want to move from simply raising concerns, but to move into a solution-based process that looks at the industry as a whole, not really looking at how does it impact or advance you as an individual or as an organization, but how do we improve the system overall to make housing achievable for those that are in the most need first, and then moving out from there. And so, as was stated, we have front-loaded this process by adding 2 additional steps to what the traditional process has been. We had our first listening tour in January, where we reached 5 cities. We're now on our 8th of 10 cities. This is the second step that is moving into now a traditional process. We're looking to close this out in mid-October, where we will have our draft regulations go before the TCAC board, which will be the final step in the process. And again, that is just the first wave. We are continuing to look at how we continue to refine and make the process better as we move forward. So even once we take the final draft regs to the board in October, that will not be our final cut at trying to improve the program. Secondly, it will be reviewed by the CDLAC board. Because of the CDLAC process, there's an additional step where it has to go before the Office of Administrative Law. We anticipate that the Office of Administrative Law, assuming the board makes approval to advance, will make their decision sometime between January of 2020 and May of 2020. We're hoping it's the former versus the latter. In that process, again, we are asking that you please engage us. We know what our expertise begin and end, but we also know that we have blind spots. And so I've heard certain things here that aren't quite accurate as it relates to what we're doing. So please engage us, ask us questions. We will try our best to respond to you. One thing to keep in mind as well, oftentimes people think of us as a huge bureaucracy. TCAC and CDLAC combined has roughly about 55 staff. So that's to put into context sort of the workload demands that we are facing as we're looking to embark upon this challenge. So with that being said, we appreciate the input. This is democracy at its finest, but please continue to engage us. Don't hear what we're doing second or third hand and come up with an assumption as to what we're doing, but please engage us directly. And so thank you for your time. I'll let Treasurer Ma close us out.
Thank you. So yes, I just want to reiterate what Jovan's saying is that we are not focused on one thing. So not one thing, but everything. How's that? We are focused on everything. We are trying to start from the top. Leadership starts at the top, and we heard you regarding cost containment. That's why we are trying to streamline our processes, having one application process, having one compliance process, making sure that we are working closely with HCD. Sorry, this is in my eye. HCD as well as CalHFA is very important, and we are working hand in hand with the governor's office. And I understand what you're saying. I just got a text from Tia Boltman that the budget is there and that there's going to be $500 million for state tax housing credits, $650 million for homeless, $500 million to finance mixed income, $250 million for housing planning and production, and $500 million for infill infrastructure grants. So the governor has committed, his money. We are going to do our best to try to get the money out because we know that there is a backfill. People are ready to build, but for whatever infrastructure, gaps, funding gaps, and so we're going to continue to work with all of you. We heard about the 4% tax applications. You know, why aren't you rolling them? We are rolling them now. There's a backfill of 8609 forms. We are looking actively in how to address these backfill to get them out there. So please, as you have issues, please engage in us. Like Jovan said, we meet with everyone. I am out in the community all the time. You will rarely see me in the office, but I will meet you in your communities. You can come in anytime. Most of you have my cell phone number, so you're texting me. You have my email. Okay, we are very, very responsive. So this is my 4th elected office, and I'm used to being in the community, being held accountable, showing up, even during the Great Recession, when many of my colleagues were scared because we faced a $40 billion deficit. I said, you need to go out in the community, let the community know, work with the community, that it is all of our issues, and this housing crisis is all of our issues, okay? We are just a part of it. We are not the ultimate solution. We are all the ultimate solution here. So since I have a couple of minutes, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the programs in my office. Since we have new programs rolling out, July 1st, we will have a new Cal Savers program. So if an employer does not offer a pension plan to your employees, you will be registering your employees with Cal Savers, which is professionally managed under my office, and this plan will follow the employee. It is a professionally managed fund that has many different investment options, and it will take the employer off the hook for managing these accounts. We also have a Cal Able account that opened this year. Anybody diagnosed with a disability before the age of 26 can now open up a bank account in his or her name and save up to $15,000. This is hopefully going to create some sort of stability and independence and dignity. CalVet. I issued $150 million in CalVet home loan bonds. So for any veteran who was not discharged dishonorably, please apply for this loan program while there's money in it. Basically, it provides down payment assistance, closing costs at a very low interest rate, regardless of your FICO score. Cal HFA, also under Tia Boatman, also is actively promoting first-time homebuyer programs. Same thing. Down payment assistance, closing costs at very favorable rates. And I also have small business programs that I administer, whether it is for small business operating costs, ADA accessibility, seismic safety improvements, electric vehicle charging stations, converting diesel trucks to clean running trucks, as well as sales tax exemption for companies who are in the what I call green manufacturing industry that is going to provide jobs and also provide clean green technology. So we have a lot of programs that we oversee in my office. Over $2 trillion runs through my office. I manage over $100 billion in short-term investments and about $95 billion in bonds. And so while we are at this special place, thanks to Jerry Brown and others, where we do have money, we need to use it wisely. We need to leverage our resources to the best of our abilities, and we look forward to working with all of you to make sure that we are all growing, thriving, surviving in our great state of California. So I thank you all for coming out, for your time, and I look forward to working with all of you.